In this video, we will be discussing the required setup to get you started with Clever Payment Plan. The first page we're going to navigate to is the Payment Plan Setup page. So to do that, I'm just going to go to the search and then I'm going to search for Payment Plan Setup. Now, as you can see on the ribbon, we do have an option for assisted setup. This will act as a setup wizard that will guide you through each of the available options on the setup screen. However, in this video, I'm just going to walk you through each of the setup fields as we see them on the page. Let's start with the payment plan number series. This field must be populated and means that once payment plans are created, these will be the numbers that are assigned to those documents. Next is the Create Payment Plan on Sales Order Release. If selected, this means that a payment plan will be automatically created upon release of a sales order. If the option isn't selected, payment plans must be created manually. Next, the Auto Post Invoices default option. If selected, this option will also be selected on the payment plan templates that we're about to set up. This means that any sales orders using a template with this option selected will automatically create posted sales invoices. If the option isn't selected, open sales invoices will be created, which will then need to be manually posted. Please note that as this is a global setting, this can be changed on a template by template basis. Finally, within the General Fast tab, we have the payment plan amount more than order amount behaviour. Within this field, there are two options, error or message. If error is selected and you attempt to change the fixed amount on a staged payment within a payment plan to exceed the total value of a sales order, you will receive an error message. However, if message is selected, a warning message will appear if you attempt to exceed the total value of a sales order on a payment plan rather than an error. Now, let's look at the Payment Plan Invoice Fast tab. First, copy order dimensions to payment plan invoice. If this option is selected, all dimensions that have been assigned to the sales order will also be pulled through to the invoice that is created. The copy order external document number to payment plan invoice means that if an external document number has been entered on the sales order, that in turn will be brought through onto the sales invoice. Then the remove the field names from the invoice line comments field. If selected, this means that you will no longer within the sales invoice be able to see field names such as type for item, number for the item number, description for the item description. Rather, you will just see the details. Finally, the auto update closing invoice when using 100% staging. Please note that this option is only applicable for sales orders where the staged payments make up 100% of the order value. So the closing invoice calculates initially as 0. This toggle is only required to be yes in the instance where you may end up increasing the value of the sales order after one of the payments has already been invoiced and you wish for the closing invoice to return to 0. Now that our payment plan setup page is complete, let's navigate to the payment plan templates page. To do that, I'm selecting Setup and Payment Plan Templates. As you can see, I already have a couple of payment plan templates set up, so let's click into one of them and walk through the setup available. Now, the first thing to note here, you will see that every field is greyed out, and that's because my status is currently set to active. Once a payment plan has been set to active, the template can no longer be edited. For the purpose of this video, I'm just going to set that back to open, and then I will activate the template once we've walked through the fields. First off, we have the code and description. Here we're just giving information on exactly what we're attempting to achieve with this payment template. So as you can see, I am going to have a first payment of 50% and then an additional 2 payments of 25%. Next, the GL account number. This is where the invoices will be posted to. Once populated, the GL account name will also pre-populate with the account description. Next, the difference GL account number, which should only be populated if there will be at any point a difference in value. For example, if you were to reduce the value of the order or undership, which will cause a difference between the initial planned staged payments and what has actually happened. If this difference GL account number is populated, that will in turn populate the difference GL account name. The auto post invoices, which we also saw on the payment plan setup page, will mean, if selected, that posted sales invoices will be automatically created as part of the payment plan process. If this option is not selected, open sales invoices will be created, which will require manual posting. We then have 2 further options that we also saw on the payment plan setup page: copy order dimensions to payment plan invoice and copy order external document number to payment plan invoice. With both of these options, we are stating that if dimensions or the external document number exist on the sales order, that we are expecting them to also pull through onto the posted sales invoice automatically. Now let's go to our lines fast tab. First, the invoice type, which is either staged payment or closing invoice. Stage payments are invoices that are created either based on dates entered or by an event. For example, you can see on this first line, I have an invoice trigger of event. And here I'm saying, upon release of the sales order, create the first staged payment of 50% of the order value. Next, the other option is closing invoice. Every payment plan template must contain a line for the closing invoice before you are able to set the template to active. What this means is if your staged payments don't make up to 100%, the closing invoice will simply create a final invoice from the sales order for the remaining amount. However, if the staged payments do make up to 100%, like they do in my example, where I've got a staged payment of 50%, then 2 25s, the closing invoice will simply be a 0 balance invoice. Now that we understand the difference between staged payments and closing invoices, let's look at the other options on the lines. First, we have value type. If percentage is selected, we must also populate the default percentage in the next column. So here you can see I am going to be creating my first staged payment for 50% of the order value. If fixed amount has been selected, then we must populate the default fixed amount field. This means that regardless of the order value, we will always be creating our first staged payment for a fixed amount. Then we have invoice trigger. This can either be date or event. Here I've selected event and I have said that I would like this first staged payment to be created upon release of the sales order. If date is selected, this will mean that when the payment plan is created from the sales order, dates will be entered at that point to confirm when the invoices should be generated. You will see that upon selecting this option, I don't need to populate any fields on this line, as instead they will be manually populated upon creation of the payment plan from the sales order. I'm just going to set that back to event and choose my invoice trigger type of release. Speaking of invoice trigger types, you can see that there are different options. Release means upon release of the sales order. First shipment means that an invoice will be generated upon the first shipment that is created from the sales order. And last shipment means that once a shipment is created, which will ship the rest of the remaining goods out, leaving nothing else left to be shipped. At that point, an invoice will be generated. The final option here is delivery date, which means that once the shipment date, which means that once the shipping time has been added to the shipment date on the sales order, the delivery date has been reached and therefore an invoice will be automatically created. Please note that if you attempt to enter multiple staged payment lines with the same invoice trigger type, you will receive an error message. Each of these invoice trigger types must be unique per line. Next, the payment terms code. This should only be populated if you wish to overwrite the payment terms code on the customer card or on the sales order. Next, manual invoice. If selected, this means that the payment plan invoices must be manually generated rather than being automatically generated, as indicated within the General Fast tab, meaning that you can have some of the staged payments be manually triggered versus automatically triggered, as we have defined within the General Fast tab. If this option is selected, we can also choose Prevent Trigger Action, as long as the line is for a staged payment. Where this option has been selected, the manual invoice must be created before the invoice trigger type, in this case the release, can occur. The final option here is Require Payment, which if selected means that the invoice must be paid before we can continue with the sales order. In this case, we would require payment for 50% before we can move on to the first shipment. And if require payment was selected on this second line, we would require payment for the 25% to occur before we could move on to the next stage payment of 25%. The final Fast tab is the Created Modified By, which simply tells us which user has created the payment plan, who has modified it, and at which date time it has been modified. With our payment plan template complete, I'm now just going to scroll back up to the General Fast tab and change the status from Open to Active. It is only once the template has been set to active that we can assign this template to our customers. Now I'm going to navigate to a customer card and assign this template to a customer. To do that, I'm first going to navigate to my customers list. Then I'm going to choose my customer record. And then I'm going to scroll down into my Invoicing Fast tab, and here, as you can see, within the payment plan section, I can choose a default payment plan. So I'm just going to make sure that it's the one that we have just looked at together and select that line. And so that is all of the setup required to get Clever Payment Plan working. In the next video, we are going to take it a step further and we are going to look at how to work with Clever Payment Plan.